Hello and welcome to Run It Back on the Raptors Republic Network. I'm Zulfi, joined here by Coty Wiles. Coty is back with us after covering a Raptors game last week, so he wasn't able to join. Unfortunately, no Kyle Ramnarine this week. We will be reunited as a trio at some point, I am sure. But until then, Coty, how have you been?
I've been great. It's been a while. Like it's not even just last week. I don't think I've popped on in almost a month. It's been football season. That's kind of preoccupied me with other I guess occupations, other commitments, I guess. But we're here. So all three of us. I don't even know the last time all three of us were on either. It's
It's been a
just
while.
yeah, it's been a while, but a lot has gone down. Zulfi, a lot has gone down. Real quick before we get obviously we're gonna talk about Brandon Ingram. Which nickname do you like better? I didn't tell you for anyone listening. I didn't tell. I didn't. I'm just bringing this up. BI3 or Slim Reefer? What are we thinking?
Okay. I mean, I think Slim Reefer is a funnier nickname. It's kind of based on his facial expressions. It may be a more apt nickname. Uh, But yeah, like I think Slim Reefer is more fun. I don't know how much it's going to catch on with a wider audience. So I'll go BI3.
The
I
notorious
like three.
BI3 is pretty good
Yeah, the
too.
notorious BI3 is a pretty fun one. I like 3I as well. I actually had it in my notes later to ask people to comment down below like which Brandon Ingram nickname they found the best. So maybe
Okay.
it's
Okay.
Slim Reefer, BI3, 3I. I've seen the Maple Reaper. I don't know how I feel about that one. That one was thrown out.
Oh, I actually don't mind that. The Maple
I don't
Reaper.
mind it. Like I get where it's coming from, so maybe that one catches on a little bit. But yeah, let us know down in the comments below which Brandon Ingram nickname is your favorite, or if you have a different one in mind. But in the meantime, we do have Raptors basketball to talk about. We're obviously very excited. I will say off the top, if you hear some crunching in the background, that is my dog. I gave him a bone to keep him preoccupied. If you are not a fan of dog ASMR, I apologize. Well, we're gonna work through this together, but he is having a good time, and that's a priority for me. So just to cover our bases on that, Coty.
All right,
Uh,
cool.
but yeah, obviously Raptors basketball did happen this week. There is 4 games. I will say at the time of us recording, the Raptors have not played their Sunday game against the Houston Rockets yet. So in the meantime, they have played 3 games this week. They are on a 3-game losing streak. They beat the Clippers to end last week, but then they lost the Knicks, the Grizzlies, and they got pumped by the Thunder. I mean, it was kind of close. They did get pumped by the Grizzlies, to be fair, but the Thunder game had some moments of competitiveness. But Coty, super quick off the top, what'd you take away from this week of basketball before we get into the trade stuff?
I mean, it's been a rough week for sure. After what the Raps went 8 of 10, 8 of 11,
Yeah,
something like that, for wins with the best defense across that stretch. Three straight losses this past week, and they weren't pretty. Memphis specifically was once again they were
beat
not
down.
good. Yes, they were not good against Darko Rakovic's former team. But I guess the biggest takeaway is just that the young guys were closing. They were closing games. They were getting more minutes, and that trend's going to continue after we get into these trades that have happened.
Yeah, I will quickly just say against the Knicks, they earned the right to close. It
They
wasn't just
did.
that
They
like
did.
it
Yes.
wasn't just oh we're gonna give them these reps. And a lot of this back half of the season, by Bobby Webster's own admission, is gonna be a lot about development for the young guys. That game against the Knicks, the starters were lifeless for a lot of it, and the young guys, namely Jamal Shed, kind of willed them back into that game and played great minutes, and that was super exciting to see. So we'll talk about that more, I'm sure, as we go on. But in the meantime, like I said, the Raptors will still play the Houston Rockets at the end of this week on Sunday. Coty, very quick, what do you predict? Do you think the Raptors are going to be able to get out of this funk, win a game against this Rockets team that did lose, I believe, 2 in a row now? They lost to Anthony Edwards and the Timberwolves after Dylan Brooks pissed off Ant, and then Dallas Mavericks in AD's debut. Also, were able to take care of business against Houston. Do you think they pick up a win against the Raps, or the Raps are able to pull it off?
I don't know, man. That's a good Rockets team. I know they haven't been the best or most like recently here,
Mm-hmm.
but that's a good team. And just seeing how what Bobby was talking about at the press conference and the shape the team is in right now, especially with no Ingram playing, it's
Yeah.
tough to see them. It's tough to see them doing well. It's funny because everybody has been talking about this easy stretch of schedule for the Raps coming in the second half of the season here. It's not easy right now.
Not right now.
I understand it gets easier as it goes, but that's largely because they play like the Wizards 3 times, the Jazz twice still, I believe. So that's what's been taking it down. But this next like 10 game stretch that they've already started, it's not fun. It's like they
Yeah.
still have some tough teams to go against. So it's I think it's gonna be rough before it gets better here, starting with the Rockets.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that because you can look at the strength of schedule thing and say, like, yes, they have the easiest strength of schedule, but you have to keep in mind this team has won 16 games.
Yeah.
They are also that weak opponent on everyone else's strength of schedule.
And they're
The
weaker now.
Wizards, yeah,
Yeah.
the Wizards have the second easiest strength of schedule. Want to know why? Because they play the Raptors a lot and vice versa. So it's really funny that we see that. When you're a team that's only won 16 games, you don't really have many gimmies, and it's only going to get harder. They still have to play the Cavs next week. They have the Celtics coming up shortly as well. So I think you're right. It's an easy schedule on paper, but not really when you're a 16 win team and you're not really prioritizing those wins. But I think that's good for the basketball talk of it all. We're obviously going to break things down in terms of the trade deadline. We will also get into our 905 report as always, Coty, and then take a peek at next week's schedule. But with that being said, let's get into it. Let's run it back as we do here. And obviously, starting, we're going to recap the trades that went down for the Raptors at the trade deadline on February 6th. There was three deals. I'm going to quickly recap them for you before we go into breaking each of them down. Obviously, the really big one was the Raptors trading for one-time All-Star Brandon Ingram. In exchange, the New Orleans Pelicans received Bruce Brown Jr., Kelly Olynyk, a 2026 first-round pick from the Indiana Pacers, and then a 2031 second-round pick straight from the Raptors. So that was the big deal of the day. Obviously, the Raptors acquiring Brandon Ingram, an All-Star caliber player. Trade number two, the Raptors received PJ Tucker. Hey, do you remember that guy? That's the third time PJ Tucker will be with the team, but probably not. He is likely to be waived. I think Bobby Webster said that basically if we find him a landing spot or he finds himself a landing spot, great, we'll send him there. Otherwise, he's kind of just going to be in no man's land for a little bit. For the troubles of taking on PJ Tucker, the Raptors got a 2026 second round pick via the Los Angeles Lakers, but in exchange, they did give defensive ace Davion Mitchell to the Miami Heat, who have a bunch of defensive studs now because they also got Andrew Wiggins, which is going to be fun to see for Miami in the whole Jimmy Butler situation. Davion is an expiring contract. He's set to be a restricted free agent after the season. So I'm sure we'll chat about that in a little bit. And finally, the last deal, a big one, I guess, in size because James Wiseman is huge and he was a former second overall pick. But the Raptors and Indiana Pacers made a deal. The Raptors received center James Wiseman and cash considerations. In exchange, they gave up a 2026 second round pick. If you're watching the video on YouTube and you're wondering why I've crossed out the name James Wiseman, is because he has since been waived by the Raptors. No, he is out this season with a torn Achilles. He suffered an Indiana season opener. So maybe there was hope that the Raptors could have taken a look at him in the offseason and seen if he could have been a prospect in the rough, maybe. But no dice. The Raptors have waived him. And if you're worried about that second round pick they gave up, it is a top 55 protected pick. So that is pretty much as fake of a draft pick as you can give up because they have to give something in return for this deal to happen to get some cash. If the Raptors have a pick that's below the top 55, they have done really well for themselves. So I don't think we need to be too worried about that. But yeah, Coty. So the three deals that happened on draft day, or not draft day, geez, on trade deadline day, Raptors were a lot busier than people expected. And the first deal was probably the one that caught the most buzz, not just because Brandon Ingram is an all-star, but because to some people it was an interesting idea of the Raptors being buyers this deadline instead of being sellers like many people expected. It's the fourth year in a row where at the deadline the Raptors have given up a first round pick rather than being the typical sellers that you want to see for the most part. And people are like, well, this is maybe conflicting with the messaging because the front office has said we're preaching patience. We're clearly in a rebuild. They've used that word as well. So then to go out and acquire an all-star to some people seems a little confusing. So the way I think we decided was the best way to address this is we're going to take this in a bit of an FAQ style. We're going to have specific questions to break down multiple things like the motivation, the fit, the cost, so we can have it in a kind of a recap sense for everybody here. So Coty, I think the easiest place to start then based on what we were just talking about and the conflicting idea of timelines is the motivation behind this deal. Why do we think the Raptors made this trade? So I'll start just by there, Coty. Like, why do you think this made sense for the Raptors, or why do you think they did it?
Because the team got better. It's as simple as that. And I've seen a lot of pushback on that. That they didn't want the team to get better. And I think when you brought up the four straight years of giving up a first round pick for a pending UFA.
Yeah.
Like it or not, that's kind of what the Raptors have to do, man.
Mhm.
Especially when they don't even have the cap space to go get players. That's one thing. Two, even if you had the cap space, Toronto has never been a notorious spot for free agents. And I think their biggest motivation was they want to be good next year. That's their moves have signaled that. Getting Brandon Ingram in the door has signaled that. That's what they want to do. And It's not going to affect this year for the most part. It shouldn't. We don't know exactly when uh, Slim Reefer, the notorious BI3, will actually suit up for the Raptors. I would assume at some point. I don't. I would doubt that they would rule him out all year, but
Yeah.
th-
You're gonna want to see him play at some point before you give him that money. But sorry, go back to Coty.
100%. And I would assume there was some, under the table talks about what that number is. And
Yeah.
the fact that Ingram waived his trade kicker is also I think is a good sign, as many people have pointed out already. But
Hmm.
it's talent in the door to me, man. And it's great. And I don't mind the fit. Maybe we can get into the fit a little bit after at some point. But as just a pure trade. Uh, they gave up two. They got off of Kelly Olynyk's money one for
Yeah.
next year. They got something for Bruce Brown, which I remember us talking a millennia ago about like what is Bruce Brown going to fetch us or fetch the Raptors, and they didn't even give up their own first round pick. They gave up a Pacers pick that's going to be in the 20s, and I doubt whoever is picked there is going to ever reach the level of Brandon Ingram. So I like it. They got to pay him, which we'll see what that number comes in so you can fully grasp it. But they got talent in the door. They wanted to get better, and they did.
Yeah, Cody, I think I'm going to echo a lot of what you're saying here. We will touch on fit and contract and stuff in a bit, but just to stick with the whole motivation aspect of it, I think it was Blake Murphy who kind of coined this term where the Raptors operate in pre-agency rather than free agency. It's this idea that they bring in guys who are on this final year of their deal a year early. They give up draft capital in a sense, yes, but then they get their bird rights and you're able to work on an extension a step ahead of negotiations. You get a bit of leverage. You still do give yourself the optionality of kind of leveraging a sign and trade if need be, if things don't go as you want to. And we've seen this for quite some time. Like I mentioned, they gave up 4 first-round picks in the last 4 deadlines for Thad, Kelly Olynyk, and Jakob Pertl in between that, but they also re-signed all those guys. So this method has worked for them in the past. They have a long history of it. I know other people like S has mentioned Kyle Lowry, Rudy Gay, Serge Ibaka, obviously the very famous one in Kawhi Leonard. They didn't re-sign him. It accomplished their goal, but they're a team, like you said, they're not a free agency hub. The way they get talent in the door is by either drafting really well, by making these swings and risks to bring talent in the door and trying to convince them to stay after they've been able to see the environment in Toronto, or they do this idea where they take on bad money and acquire draft capital for middling draft picks to hopefully see if one of those swings pay off. And I will say that last method is hardly any more reliable than what they're doing now. Trying to work through just the draft, it's a crapshoot. I think we've all learned that. So if you're relying solely on the draft, I don't know if that's the best method. And I'm saying that for all the people who are like, the Raptors just need to sell, 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 get as much draft capital as you can. I get it in a sense, but to your point, Cody, that method makes a lot more sense when this team has a longer term timeline, when it's a 4, 5, 6 year rebuild. And I don't think this organization ever saw it as that. They saw it as a 1, 2, 3 year. Why? Well, a big reason is because they have Scotty Barnes on his rookie scale max extension. Emmanuel Quickly is on near max money. Jakob Pertl and RJ Barrett are extension eligible. The clock is already ticking. If you waste 4 to 5 years of this rookie scale max extension from Scotty, not only is it going to be harder to build a successful core around him next time we have to pay him even more, the chances of him wanting to leave are much greater. Most rookies, they go through this rookie scale max extension. I actually don't know if any rookies have not signed this rookie scale max extension when they've been eligible for it. Almost all of them do. Like for the first 7 years, you can pretty much guarantee your rookie star is going to stay with you. It's after that things get dicey if it's not working in the right situation. So if they're not able to capitalize on this window to at least make their team better enough to make those subsequent moves like they have in years past, it's going to be a much more difficult proposition. We've already seen the reports that the Raptors want to add a significant piece next to Scotty Barnes. And I think that was a big motivation why. Like, yes, you can say the Brandon Ingram money that's presumably coming is going to make that more of a challenge, but having that challenge for a competitive team makes more sense than having it for a team that's just filled with bad contracts and draft capital that may or may not swing, I think is the way the front office sees it. So I think in terms of motivation, you and me are agreeing here that it makes sense based on their timeline. It makes sense based on their kind of method of trying to get talent and their perspective on it as well.
Yeah, I'll add in that this team is barely like they're too good to tank now. It's just because of the injuries that
Yeah, that's a
they've
good
been
point.
bad. We've seen how fully healthy how good they can be. They sold off pieces, so they did sell. They're a worse team than they were before the deadline, regardless if Brandon
Absolutely.
Ingram plays or not, even if it's only 10 games. And also, they're going to be too good to tank next year, regardless if you had BI on the team or not. Like, expect jumps from everybody on this team because everybody's like 21, man. Like, everybody's so
Yeah.
young. You got all those rookies who are now going to be getting all that playing time and are going to be hopefully better next year as they should. Scotty's gonna get better. Grady's gonna get better. Like they would, you're not out tanking these other teams. And now, even with the acquisition, you can still tank this year, and that's what they're gonna do. Now you got BI in the door. You got this. It's a pretty solid young core when you look at it up and down. There's some money things that we'll get into that you got to figure out, but I mean, you add a potential top 5 pick to this group, that's
Yeah,
you're easily in the East, especially.
we cook it with gas.
You could get a top 6, like next year's team potentially could be better than the Pistons team this year, and they're a top 6 seed. Like they're a 500 team. It takes, you have to be a 500 team to be a 6 seed in the East right now. So
Yeah,
I think
and
this team can play 500 ball.
yeah, and like I think the major point is like I think a lot of people are hoping that you kind of tank your way to all these picks, a couple of them swing, and you jump a couple steps to that point of being a contender again. It's not really how it goes in most situations. You can look at the Thunder as the best example. Like, yes, they kind of built up this draft capital, they drafted really well and got these guys, but even then, they are still going through the growing pains. We consider them a really good contender now. They haven't made it out of the second round with SGA yet. They haven't even got to that extra point. They are still going through the steps. It is a gradual process, and the Raptors are trying to start their process now while they have Scotty Barnes on this rookie scale max extension, which is like you can look at it value wise depending on how you want, but like they're going through the steps, and it's because some people will say like, well, this is happening faster than you would have expected, but yeah, it's because Scotty Barnes has gotten better faster than most people have expected. So it's going to be interesting to see how people come around to it, depending on what the number is. I think is going to be a big part of it for Brandon Ingram's contract, the subsequent dealings, how the Raptors look after the fact. But in order to understand that a bit more, obviously, we have to see Brandon Ingram on the court and see what he's like next to Scotty Barnes and the rest of these guys, Coty. And I think the easiest place to start with fit, I think we can both agree on this part, is that Brandon Ingram's ability as an isolation scorer and his pull-up shooting will immediately address some needs for the Raptors. Like, do we agree on that?
Oh, 100%, 100%.
Yeah. So I think Bobby Webster put it really well as well. He said Scotty likes to pass, Brandon Ingram likes to score. So I think that marriage should make sense in some regards. But I guess going beyond that, how do you see this fit working, not just between them, but between Brandon Ingram and the Raptors and their offense?
Yeah, real quick, I just want to plug Lewis's piece. If you want to learn more in depth about the fit with some legit numbers, Lewis, and with some film, Lewis dug into it really well. Go check that out on Raptors Republic. He explains it more in depth, so I'm gonna pull some stuff from that as well. But I mean, yeah, the isolation is the biggest thing. He's probably the best offensive player on the team. Brandon Ingram is.
Yeah.
I would say he's more talented than Scotty right now. He's just more dynamic with the ball, and you can get him doing a lot of different things. Like I mentioned, the isolation scoring is something that this team has lacked. Like quite, it's been bad. Like we've seen Scotty with this run as a number one, as a trying to create all this, and it hasn't been the best, to be fair. So having him next to Scotty will help that, because we've seen Scotty and Siakam. They were at the very worst, they were neutral. Like
Yeah.
I think they were. I think their net rating is still positive between those two when they were on the court together. But having that uh, more go-to scorer next to Scotty, I think works. Take some pressure off his plate. He can do the things that he's really good at, being more around the rim. Uh, I do have a little bit concern of how the mid-range area is going to play out, but I think it can work out. Siakam dominated the middle of the floor as well, and him and Scotty were able to play off each other. I think if you get Ingram pushing out a little farther, being all on the perimeter a little more, Scotty moving in, I think you can do a lot of things with them, even if necessarily those two aren't going to be like running actions together necessarily. That doesn't have to be the case. It's just the fact that they can attack from multiple different ways. Scotty can drive and kick to Brent. Like I know Ingram hasn't necessarily been like the biggest like catch and shoot guy and embrace that role, but who knows? And especially when he's coming to play an offense, he's never played an offense like Darko's offense,
Yeah.
this
That's a
point
big part.
five system. And Brandon's a good passer, and I think that's going to be the biggest piece that comes out with him on Toronto is the passing.
Yeah. I think that's a really good point. And I'm gonna get to like how what Darko's offense can mean to Brandon Ingram and his marriage with Scotty Barnes here. But just like going back to what he addresses right away, just at a surface level, like you said, the isolation scoring type stuff. Basketball Index has him as a 91st percentile in terms of one versus one, like shot making efficiency. The Raptors really truly don't have a here, take the ball, one on one, score type of guy. in terms of looking at him as one-on-one in terms of shot making efficiency in the mid-range, he's 98th percentile. We all know he is just phenomenal when it comes in terms of working in the mid-range and being able to score on players with his pull-up shot making. That again, just the Raptors don't exactly have that. Samson tweeted about this, especially as a three-point shooter. They have very few guys who shoot threes off pull-ups in high efficiency. Sorry, in high volume, but also high efficiency. You have Grady Dick and Scotty Barnes that do some pull-up stuff in like high volume, but not so great efficiency. Brandon Ingram can help address that. There is some questions about his pull-up shooting from downtown. I think that's more of a problem for Emmanuel Quickly to solve. And if we're plugging pieces, look at Sampson's piece today on Emmanuel Quickly fitting in this offense and what his role can be around Scotty Barnes and Brandon Ingram. I think that was very interesting. And again, it speaks to some of those pull-up shooting woes. But Brandon Ingram, again, he has an ability to space the floor. He's one of those few guys where he shoots better above the break than he does from the corners. He shoots there more frequently. The Raptors are 23rd this year in above the break 3-point shooting at 33%. Brandon Ingram's a 38% above the break 3-point shooter. So I think that's going to help space things out with this offense. And when we're going to that idea of a marriage between the two, it's going to require a bit of stuff from Brandon Ingram to kind of buy into the system. But if he can, the Raptors can really take advantage of him and in terms of his playmaking. It was funny, like I think S is the one who's really mentioned this or pinned down on the fact that if you look at his shot frequency distribution, it's like less than 20% of his shots come at the rim. 50% or more of his shots come from the mid-range, right? So it's like 90 plus percentile for the most part, 99 even percentile in terms of mid-range shot frequency. His one season where he was an all-star, it was a much more even distribution of shots.
Yes,
32%, 32% from the rim, 36% from the mid-range, and then 32% from three-point shooting in his all-star season. He was playing with a big facilitator in Lonzo Ball. Granted, Zion Williamson was injured that season. It was Zion Williamson's rookie season. So maybe you can see like, okay, he did that without Zion there. What's that going to mean? But I think it's to say that Darko's offense, like you said, Coty, should be able to kind of empower him to do more of this stuff off ball and get different types of look. Brandon Ingram, like you said, doesn't shoot a lot of catch and shoot threes, but he converts them at a 40% clip. He's a good enough three-point shooter. He should have decent gravity there, or he should at least command it as he continues. So Darko Rajakovic's offense, I think, will be able to empower him in some of this stuff. It's just going to come down to like when it's not the scripted stuff. Is he still engaged in this? Is he still willing to move off ball? He's incredibly efficient when it comes to his cutting scoring efficiency, but he cuts very little. In New Orleans, his cut frequency was like less than 3% pretty much his entire time there. He converted at like 75+% for most of the time, but if he's not cutting a lot outside of scripted stuff, well, then he's kind of falling into that idea where he's saying there may be overlap, there may be stuff where it's not going to work. So I think that marriage is going to rely a lot on Darko's offense and Brandon Ingram buying into it.
I mean, if by all reports, he wanted to come. He's happy to come here. He's fond of Toronto. I mean, I don't. That's not me reporting that. That's just what's been out there. I believe
He said it. He said it in a video. It's one of his favorite cities.
He did. I did. I did see that. And according to Chris Haynes, he wanted a change of scenery, and Toronto was an option because, I mean, if I'm him, like I believe he's gonna buy in. I mean, you can't really not buy in when you're coming to a situation like this. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
it's just a matter of he's 27, and it's hard to change a dude who's like you can't change your game fully. So it's gonna be, I think, if they can land that perfect like. We don't want to fully convert you from not doing any isolation or anything like that where you're best at, but if they can marry it all together and it all looks great, they can it could be really
Yeah.
well done. And I just want to bring up quickly on the defensive side of things, people act like he's a turnstile. I don't think that's the case. um it's tough to judge generally, but he's massive, and the Raptors are
Yeah.
back to now being, he might not be the sticky like big wing defender that they needed, but he's massive. And when you assuming the starting lineup when fully healthy and everything would be IQ, RJ, Scotty, Bi, Jakob, that's massive. Like
Huge size on the wing, which is becoming more important. You just saw the Cavs trade for DeAndre Hunter because they want to match up against the Celtics better and deal with that size on the wing. So like again, like to your point, Coty, the Raptors are trying to get closer to that.
Yep. So I think he can be part of I have no concerns with him being part of a good defense. I don't know. We'll see what happens because they have definitely gotten worse defensively now that they've lost players like Davion Mitchell and Bruce Brown Jr.
Yeah.
But if RJ, who has shown some strides defensively this year, if he can continue to put that up and Bi is able to not be a negative, I I'm perfectly fine with the fit on both sides.
Yeah, like I'll add some context of numbers to it. So only 3 of his seasons in New Orleans did he have a positive defensive on off. So you are like he hasn't been like the most like let's say apt defender. I think that's fair to say. But to your point, Cody, it's not like he's a slouch on that end either. He's basically been a net neutral in over 10,000 minutes in New Orleans when it comes to his on-offs on defense. He's a pretty good defensive rebound. He's 80th percentile for the last 4 years. And a big thing that I saw is that he hardly fouls. He's 80th percentile in the last 5 years in terms of foul rate. And we obviously know in this Toronto offense, this Toronto defense, a big issue has been just the amount of fouls they pick up with this MIG aggressive point of attack guy thing. Maybe it picks up for Brandon Ingram in this defensive scheme as well. But having a guy with a bit more just reliability there, I think will make a difference. Like you mentioned, huge size, that wingspan at 7'3" with a 6'8" frame, I think will just add on its own to this team. I don't think anyone's expecting him to become this all-world defender, but for me, it comes back down to like, is he engaged in the system and is he buying in? His best individual defensive rating, again, happened his all-star season with New Orleans. Since then, it has gone down. Is it some of it because his burden on offense has increased? I don't know. I guess we have to see. When it comes to him, when he's engaged on that end, I think we both agree here that he has the chops to at least be a not a negative defender.
Yeah, and I just want to say he's so fun to like. He's so cold. He's so fun to watch. Like
He's
that's
so
just another
calm.
part of it. Like it's just gonna be fun. Like, and that's the other thing. Like, I hope people weren't tuning in for like a debate show. We're just singing his praises because I
Yeah.
know there is quite a bit of divide. Shockingly to me,
Yeah.
um, how many people are so against this.
Yeah.
But
Do you want to talk about some of it? Because I have a couple points where people are kind
okay,
of worried, and maybe we
sure,
can break it down that way.
yeah, let's if you want to, we're kind of going away from the facts thing here, but if you
Yeah.
want to, let's talk about the negatives. Like, so okay, I
Yeah.
mean, the biggest thing to me is just the contract. And that like that to me, that's I think the looming over it. Like if
Yeah.
he's gonna get upwards of like 50 million, which is what he was reportedly asking for in New Orleans, then things get hairy for sure. I don't think that's what he's gonna get. There hasn't been a market for him. The Pelicans have been trying to trade him for what, a year and a half now,
Yeah,
and
he
they haven't.
apparently told the Pelicans like once they wasn't much of a market and it was between like a couple teams. He said Atlanta or Toronto, I guess makes sense.
Yeah,
So it,
yeah.
it wasn't a bunch of suitors to your point.
Yeah. So, I think that's the biggest to me, that's the biggest negative. I understand why people giving up a first for a pending UFA. That on the surface level, I understand that. But when you throw around the 4 straight years of all that, there's a reason, like you talked about the pre-agency. Free agency isn't even a thing anymore in the NBA. It's just about having the money on your books to then flip and aggregate in trades. And Brandon Ingram's going to come at a decently high number to where, for whatever happens in the future, even if it doesn't work out, I think you could get out of it with
Yeah,
BI. If he's the one you want to move, if RJ's the one who needs a contract extension, I think you can get out of it, Hazy.
yeah, I'm with you. I get the word I keep using is optionality. The projected cap is going to be rising. Obviously, that can change depending on how things go. I think we all expect the cap to keep rising. So it's like the thing with the Manuel Quickly deal. When you first signed it and you compare it to some of the numbers, it doesn't look great. Obviously, with his injuries right now, it still doesn't look great. But in terms of being able to move it, the numbers don't look as dicey after a while. But I will say, just to add some context on the contract stuff, before June 30th, basically the Raptors can offer Brandon Ingram a 3-year extension of up to 144 million. That is the
Yeah.
max, which would be 48 million per. If he goes to unrestricted free agency because they're not able to come to an extension deal by June 30th, he's eligible for up to 5 years at 269 million. That's around $54 million per, which obviously gets a bit more dicey. And then the thing I'll add is Michael Grange with Sportsnet. He did say that based on the people he's been talking to, one, it's more likely that they go to 3 years than 5 years. So not that full extension, not getting him to free agency, doing it before, not necessarily the max either, I think is a big part of that. And then based on the cap projections, the Raptors, again, Blake Murphy did a lot of work for Sportsnet here. Go check out his cap breakdown piece. It was awesome. But 49 million under the tax is basically what the Raptors have to work with to get Ingram on an extension to then sign their first round pick, which will vary drastically based on where they pick. If it's a number one pick, it's around like 10 million plus, I think, and then 3 final roster spots, right? And you're thinking that like, okay, 49 million under the tax is a lot to try to make that happen. They can do it. It's going to require cooperation from a Brandon Ingram in a deal, and it's dicey. But then you hear Bobby Webster, and he basically said, I think we've always said this. We're going to go into luxury tax when we want to be competitive. So if you just go into luxury tax, a lot of these problems about this being tight and that go away. Are you
And
worried
yeah.
about it's going to be too expensive having a team that's maybe middle of the pack? We're not footing the bill. So I personally don't really see an issue with it. If the organization is with it, maybe it's going to cause problems like longer down the road. But right now, Bobby Webster has said when they want to be competitive, which from what you said, Coty, and what I think most people are understanding is next year, they're okay going into luxury tax to make this stuff happen. So I'm not too worried about it just yet.
Yeah, exactly. And if you have to go into luxury tax because you land the number one overall pick and you got to pay Cooper Flag, I believe it's a 13 around $13 million
Yeah.
salary. Oh no, like it's a good
Champagne
problem.
problems, man.
And what and what Blake did is what the Raptors front office have done. And I'm sure they obviously have a number that they think they're going to get Brandon in at, and they know they've been doing the projections themselves, right? Because that's obviously what front offices do. So I
Yeah.
think they're pretty comfortable to be around that tax line, if not a little over, a little under. Remember, you don't have to get underneath it until the end of the season, so they can
Yeah.
head
Good point.
into the year above it and then do whatever to get underneath it to navigate that, which we see all the time. The Raptors helped the Pacers do it this year with taking on James Wiseman and then waiving him, who I would have liked to. I wouldn't have minded if he stayed, by the way, but I mean, we'll touch on that in a little bit.
Yeah.
But there it's going to be a little cap gymnastics here, but the team's better, and I'm happy. Is there any other downside to this? Like,
Yeah, I think the big one that people still want to see a bit more of, again, is going back to that marriage with Scotty Barnes specifically.
okay,
You talked about it, the look with Pascal Siakam maybe didn't bear as much fruit as some people wanted, maybe some people hoped. I think there was this idea of there was overlap there. So with Scotty Barnes and Brandon Ingram, like you said, Coty, they both like to operate in the middle, and that might be a bit of an overlapping thing that can cause some friction or some issues in terms of efficient offense. But I think for me, it's like I like the idea that Scotty has added this whole mid-range game to his bag. I
yep.
like it as a counter. Do we think he's falling a bit too in love with it recently? Like, if you look at the numbers, he's 98th percentile in frequency right now, but 65% in efficiency. Like, against OKC, he was 2 of 7 from the mid range, settling quite a bit. There was a play I vividly remember where he got it in the on the left, like post, like mid post area. He had Shea Gilgeous Alexander on him, who I get is no slouch as a defender, but much smaller. He didn't even attempt to try backing him down in the post. He took one like little dribble, turnaround fade, stuff like that. Like, do you think Scotty is maybe what with all the experimenting and all the burden he's had on him, quite frankly, offensively? Do you think he's kind of fading away from his more natural, aggressive downhill play style? And will Brandon Ingram be able to fix that? Or are you worried about this is just kind of the Scotty that he is now, and this is going to overlap too much?
You know what? I'm not worried about it because I think he's trying stuff, and I think the Raptors want him to try stuff. Let's see how expanded we can get this, like this short to mid range game. Like, let's see how well you do on these turnarounds, on these fadeaways, on these one legged Dirk Nowitzki style. Like,
Yeah,
that's basically his signature move as what he's developed this year. I think they want him to go and experiment, and I think we know he can get downhill. We know he can do all things. He hasn't really shown it this year specifically. Maybe the
yeah,
injuries have played a part. Like, I mean, if I broke my orbital bone, I'd probably be a little afraid to attack downhill. And
fair point.
he's been having ankle problems all year. Like, he rolls his ankle like once every 2 games, and he's limping around for the rest of the game. I don't know if anybody else catches that or if that's just me, but he's been clearly battling through things. And honestly, like, even if this is him now, like, even if he is gonna be doing a lot of that, honestly, like, Ingram's mid-range game is more higher, closer to the 3-point line, if you know what I mean. Like,
Yeah, yeah,
he's
fair.
operating more around the free throw line. Obviously, he can still get down on the block and
He
do
drives
whatever.
actually a lot. I think, I don't know
Yes.
how many people it is, but 12 drives a game is pretty high up in the league, and he's like seventh in efficiency. So Ingram is no slouch as a driver. He doesn't always go to the rim, like again, 18% frequency at the rim, but he is driving the ball quite a bit.
Yeah, I feel like Scotty's mid-range game is more around the low block, and Biaz is more around the free throw line generally. So there is some natural like space there, and they're different in the mid-range for sure. Like, Scotty isn't like breaking you down and then hitting a tough pull-up in your face yet. Maybe
Yeah,
we'll see, but that's more Bi attacking like that, and then Scotty wants to back you down, so, like, in theory, and then do whatever to you. So even with the concerning mid-range stuff like that, I think they can get rid of it. But I also think they're wanting Scotty to experiment and let's see what he can
yeah,
do because we know he can do the other things. Let him get healthy. Let him do this. And if it results in losing, oh well.
yeah,
But
fair.
he's getting the reps.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think this is the one part where you and we're not debating, I don't think, but I think we differ a little bit. I do like the idea of Scotty being able to try things out, but I think there's also something to be said about like him also punctuating his strengths. Again, like Bobby Webster said, he's naturally a facilitator. He passes, other guys score. I think Scotty Barnes in years past has been very, very impactful as a guy who can get downhill and get aggressive. You are right. I think it's a very fair point about the injuries and how much of an impact that may be having in some of this stuff. But just getting him at the basket a bit more, getting him to the rim, simplifying again that burden on offense. And we haven't even touched on it yet. Brandon Ingram, this guy is a pretty stout passer. He averages 5 assists a game or
Yep.
more pretty much the entire time in New Orleans. As a pick and roll ball handler, he's not better than Scotty or even RJ or Emmanuel quickly, but he's right below them in terms of frequency. He operates as a pick and roll ball handler even more than Scotty Barnes does. So he has a lot of comfortability coming from New Orleans as an operator. And I think what that allows to do is, if we're talking about experimenting, you can get Scotty Barnes working off the ball a bit more than he has been, especially these last couple of games. And if you can have him as a roll man, which he hasn't been kind of like this expert screening and cutting type of guy, Scotty Barnes' efficiency as a roll man has had some juice to it. Like the Raptors offense as a whole, they cut like crazy. They're second in cut frequency, but it's obviously hasn't been guys like Scotty or like some of these other ball handlers like RJ or Emmanuel quickly. It's been the other guys going off of them, right? But Scotty can probably do more damage as a cutter getting to the basket. His frequency is around 5%, but he converts at a 60% clip. So if you have him doing more of that stuff, I think there's some juice there, especially with a stout passer in Brandon Ingram, if you are going to try to find a marriage between these two guys.
Yeah, speaking to the passing about Ingram specifically, and this isn't even related to Scotty, it's just more so about Ingram's passing. It is going to be, I guess I will say that is one thing I am going to be keeping an eye out on. And like you already touched on it, it's just like, how is that going to look in this new offense? Like he was one
Yeah.
of 33 players last year to finish more than two possessions via isolation and to average it nearly a point per game, 0.9. And when you're in Darko's system, that's not really, we saw like a Gary Trent Jr. who that's all he didn't really fit the Darko system and then didn't really impact the game. Obviously Brandon Ingram is a lot better than Gary Trent Jr., but it's going to be interesting to see how he's able to balance it. Like I was saying, like how will that mesh? I think there's potential there because of how good of a passer he is, and the offense can really bring that out. And if he's willing to do the off-ball stuff, if he's willing to cut, use his length to finish at the rim, like he's well, what's his wingspan? Like 7'3", I think.
Yeah,
And
7-3.
like you mentioned, he doesn't do it often, but he finishes at such a crazy clip. Same with the catch and shoot threes. Doesn't do it often, but he does it at a crazy efficient clip.
Yeah.
So if they can all figure out how to ex oh ex, ex, extrem ex, ex,
Extract? Is that what you're going for?
extrapolate that.
Sure, let's
Extra-
go with that. Let's go with that. Extrapolate? Is that what you're trying to say? Is that the word?
yes,
Extrapolate?
yes,
Yeah. Is
yeah.
that it? Okay, cool.
If you
The
can
word of the day, folks. Extrapolate.
if we can extrapolate those lower clip, high efficiency things that he can do, I think they're gonna kill it. I will say they're getting a little cute. They're trying to get cute, but I think that's what savvy front offices have to do to get ahead.
Yeah. And I think you're right that they have to extrapolate. Again, like the word I'm using is like they got to get more juice out of some of these like low clip, high efficiency things. And that goes for both sides. Like I think there's been a lot of conversation of like, this is what BI can work on and kind of fix with Darko Rajakovic and this offensive scheme. But I think it's a lot of like, how can this scheme and offense empower some of what BI strengths are, like being a pick and roll ball handler and get some of these other guys, like again, like a Scotty Barnes, he's more attuned to being a pick and roll ball handler. But then, like, if you look at Brandon Ingram, we've talked about it. The guy doesn't really cut outside of scripted stuff. The guy doesn't really roll outside of scripted stuff. So you're going to ask him to do some more of that, but at the same time, let him be comfortable. Let him be a pick and roll ball handler, which he's shown success at. And the Raptors aren't a great pick and roll team. And then let Scotty be a guy to get some of those more off ball reps. Let other guys work off Brandon Ingram a bit more and kind of get stuff that way. So I think like we've talked about it. And Samson had his mailbag today with Joe Wolf on, and the phrase he used was it's a hopeful marriage. And I think that's a really good way to put it because in this marriage, you have both sides that need to adjust to each other. It's not one or the other. And if they get both these guys who don't have great frequency in some of these off ball areas to invest into that with each other and then let the other guy still play to their strengths a little bit, I think there's a ton of juice there and ton of potential. Even if that doesn't happen, these two can still operate on this team in their own strength and be effective. But that marriage there, if it does work, I think there's a lot to be excited about.
Yeah, I think that's a good place. I think that's a good place to end it. Is there anything else we want to touch on? We've gone 40 minutes talking. There was two other
Uh,
trades, by the way, Z.
yeah,
There was
I
two
mean,
other trades.
I feel bad just harping on just this deal, but I think we agree it's the biggest
Yeah,
one. We both
yeah,
clearly put a lot of research and thought into it. The
yeah,
last thing I'll say is I don't know if you agree with this per se. I think the injury concern stuff is a bit overblown in my opinion. I'll tell you why in a second, but do you have any worries about the injury stuff?
for sure. I think that you. I don't think you cannot have. I don't think you could be cool with it totally. You
Yeah,
know what I
fair.
mean? Like, I not specifically for the one that's happening now, because who knows what's going on, but it is kind of concerning that he's averaging around 65 games around there, and he's missing about 20 or more games a year.
Yeah.
Um, I will say that is a bit concerning, but what are you gonna do? He does have like the frame kind of scares me when it comes to that
Yeah, he's a
stuff.
slender frame, which is fair.
But
Like go
overall,
ahead.
it's not like it doesn't stop me from not doing the trade
Yeah,
again.
very, very fair. I think what the number I've seen used from a lot of people is 64 games. Basically, he hasn't played more than 64 games since his rookie season. The context I want to add, and to Vivek Jacobs' credit, he's the one who wrote about this in his Substack. So I didn't come up with this on my own, even though I was looking at the numbers as well. Two of those seasons were COVID years, so 64 is still in those 2 years. Those 60 odd whatever games he played were over 80% of the game. So I'm going
Yeah.
to use a number 70%. I'll explain why I just think 70% is a nice safe number in terms of
And that's why I said
availability.
like the 65 games kind of thing. I know it's not
Yeah,
actually
so
been six, but yeah, you go
yeah.
ahead.
So 65 games is 79%. And if you're looking at
Okay.
that, well, then he's only been able to achieve over 79% in 3 of his first 8 seasons. Not a great number. One of those years, he was at 78%. So he's basically there. If you go down to 70%, which I still think is a fair number of in terms of availability, he's done that in 5 of his first 8 seasons. He had a couple of freak injury seasons, but I'm not to the point of concern where I think there's anything chronic or reoccurring. Like with Joel Embiid, chronic knee issues, right? So I don't think Brandon Ingram has that kind of injury concerns to go with. Yes, he's had some freak injuries. Yes, you can probably attribute some of that to his slender frame, like you said, Coty. Some of that of it also you have to take into the context of the New Orleans Pelicans and what they've dealt with. They've been a pretty injury ravaged team for a while. They still don't have the Zion Williamson situation under control. Granted, some of that probably you have to hold accountable to Zion Williamson himself, but there is something to be said about that team and in terms of their injury history. The Raptors have had some injury problems the last couple of years, but Bobby Webster said it himself. He thinks they have the best medical staff in the NBA. So they're going to trust them to figure it out. And I think that's also part of the reason why you like this idea of them bringing him in early, because they get to see his body before trying to invest this money into him. They get an up close look with their medical staff at Brandon Ingram and how he's recovering from this injury and what's going on before they decide to put that money down versus doing it in free agency. Bobby Webster said as much. He's like, I'm not just excited to have the guy here. I'm excited for our medical staff to take a look at the guy and see if we should be really worried about it. And then we have to pivot in terms of if we want to keep him long term or not. So that's just I see it as even more reason for doing the deal or doing the trade the way that you did it. You get to bring this guy in earlier. You get to evaluate his body before investing. And again, I don't have as many concerns as some other people because I don't think it's a chronic issue.
Yeah, no, I agree. That's a great point. That's a fantastic point. And um yeah, like it just makes you more comfortable giving up the first. Like nobody wants to give up a first round pick, but
Yeah,
the fact you got
it's the
frame
Raptors tax. You have to do it. Like it's the Raptors
exactly.
tax.
And I think part of it is like they get him in early, they get his bird right, so that's naturally value. The Pacers are taking or the Pacers, the Pelicans are taking on Kelly Olynyk's contract for next year, which I think is part of it. And it's
Huge.
just like and he's just like a good player. Like he's just a good player and the fact he's a UFA. So
Yeah.
I think a first round pick, all things considered, is fair. Um, and that's really all they gave up to it. I'm not too. I mean, love Kelly Olynyk. I don't know a Raptors fan who doesn't like at least Kelly Olynyk the
Captain
person.
Canada, man. You respect him
Exactly.
for his services.
He wanted to retire here. Kind of. It was sad to see him go. Thought early reports were indicating that it was going to be Chris Boucher, but he survives another. Let's just. Can he just be a Raptor forever? Like, let's just. Can he just
He
retire?
I saw a thing the other day where he leads the franchise in every category off the bench,
Off the
like bench
bench, yeah.
scoring, bench blocks, bench reboundings, bench field goals, bench games. I think there's a thing going around where he's like, what now, 3 games away from surpassing or tying Vince Carter in total games played for the Raptors. He'd be
Yep.
one of like couple guys to play over, was it four? I
Four,
can't even remember the number,
400. I
400.
believe he just hit 400. Yeah.
Yeah. Keep it
So
in the franchise for like at this point, like Bobby Webster said it. It takes two to tango, but like just keep him as a veteran presence. You said it, Cody. This bench is
Yeah.
super young now. Him and Garrett Temple, just keep him around, and he still contributes.
That's another thing. Garrett Temple, BI teammates before, and
Yeah.
we all love Garrett Temple. We all know the impact he's had on
Yes.
a multitude of players. He's basically just a player's coach. Like that's basically what he is. Um, and so I'm sure that's another reason why BI feels comfortable, and maybe why Temple will stick around even longer. Whether it's he takes up a roster spot or he's just joins the coaching staff after the year, I don't know. But I think we should move on. I think we
Yeah.
should touch on the other moves real quick, and it's nothing. I mean, I don't know if you wanted to go anywhere specifically, but James Wiseman, like it's shout out cash considerations. We were the Raptors were getting those
Get
all
some
over
money.
the
Yeah.
but yeah, Wiseman waived for a top 55 protected pick, a fake second. They're just helping the Pacers out. They're gonna get that second back. It's whatever. They got the cash. Sucks to see Davion go hazy. Us, we know specifically covering the 905 how much that dude actually just loves basketball and
So
wanted
much,
to
man.
support his teammates that were down there playing. It's not fun to go to Paramount Fine Food Center. It's not like it's like you have to go out of your way to go there. So he was one of the guys since we started covering the team that I don't know. I don't think there's anybody else who has um,
Not as
gone
much
to
as
as many.
him.
No,
Yeah.
nowhere, not close. I don't think so. Um, respect to Davion Mitchell. PJ Tucker, a third-time Raptor, doesn't look like he's technically a Raptor this time. Well, he is
Probably not.
technically, actually, but
Yeah.
won't report. But anything else you want to touch on with those?
Uh, yeah, with the Davion Mitchell thing, I think we all agree it's kind of sad to see him go. I think some people wanted to see him stick around a little bit with the idea of like iron sharpens iron. Him and Jamal Shed could really build a partnership. We're hoping Jamal Shed did learn a lot from him. I think this deal also signals that the Raptors have a lot of faith in Jamal Shed as a backup point guard, at least enough to give him those reps and let him be the number two now. I think that's pretty evident through this. It's like, Jamal, you are going to be this backup point guard. We've seen enough. We're comfortable with it. Obviously, a part of it is Davion Mitchell was a restricted free agent. If another team came in with a very nice offer, were the Raptors ever going to match it? Given the numbers we just talked about with this idea of bringing in Brandon Ingram, like with that calculation in mind,
Exactly.
probably not. He was going to
Yeah.
walk. So you recoup some value. It is sad to see a guy go. He was also a very nice person to talk to when I have. He was very, very kind with all the fans, taking a lot of time to speak with them, to greet fans and stuff like that. I think you always appreciate that in a player. And you're going to miss it, but you understand it makes sense. And again, he's going to a more competitive situation in Miami.
And he'll fit
Obviously,
right in there. Hey, he'll
yeah,
fit right in.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
And,
you're happy for him in that sense.
yeah, the money was probably the biggest part of it. I thought
For sure.
maybe because they wanted to be competitive next year, clearly that Mitchell can help with that, and we've seen like he just no, I guess not solely propped up the defense, but he was the biggest reason why they had the. I would say he was one of the biggest reasons that
Yeah,
he.
he definitely was up there because it was when IQ was out and he stepped into the starting lineup, so he gets tons of the credit for that.
Yeah, so sad to see him go. But Chris Boucher survives. Davion Mitchell does not. Neither does Bruce Brown Jr. or Captain Canada. What a pod, hey?
Yeah,
About
crazy.
95% of it was Brandon Ingram, but deservingly so. He's a good player.
He's a very good player, probably the best player they've had talent wise next to Scotty Barnes since Kawhi Leonard was here before Scotty, but like you know what I mean. Like talent wise, it's probably the biggest guy they brought in since Kawhi Leonard in terms of just talent in the door. So we will probably be talking about it more and more and more as the weeks come on. But I think that wraps up that stuff. We will touch on super quick with the 905 Cody, obviously, since that is our thing and it's what we do. So just to show some folks here that the Raptors rookies, as we mentioned, they were not with the 905. So that's Jameson Battle and Jonathan Mobile, who spent quite some time with the junior dinos. They're with the big club. And unfortunately, that meant a tough week for Raptors 905. They started with a road loss to the Indiana Mad Ants, led by Jahlil Okafor, of all people, who is a G League All-Star, by the way. And then they returned home to Mississauga and took on the Osceola Magic. And another name in Mac McClung, shout out, two-time dunk champion. He's going to be going back to the dunk contest this year. He torched Raptors 905 for 39 points and a Magic win. So the 905 still haven't gotten past 11 wins, I believe. They've tailed off in the Eastern Conference. They go down a couple games. But super quick, Cody, like any takeaways from the 905 before we get into the more prudent news, which is Jameson Battle?
No, not necessarily. It's been one of their it's the worst week of the regular season, didn't catch a win. And that obviously ties into not having Jameson Battle there, not having Jonathan Mobo there. We'll get into Battle real quick. Just Orlando Robinson also
Yeah.
got converted to that two-way contract, and the 905 are probably gonna have the best big rotation in the G League.
It's gonna be
Between
huge,
him, Frank
literally.
Kaminsky, and Ulrich Shamshay, like those all three of those dudes could start on a G League team, and the big depth is already bad in the G. Like those, the fact the Raptors have those three, and
Yeah.
because Orlando has to take over, he doesn't get a new 50 games, right?
Yeah,
He
he only
takes
gets
over.
18 now, I believe.
I believe it's a little less actually. I think it's like
Might be.
12.
Oh, yeah, you might yeah,
Last time
it's
I
around 12 to
looked,
15, something like that. It's not a
last
lot, that's for sure.
yeah, last time I looked, I believe it's 12. I could be wrong. I'm pretty sure it's 12. But yeah, so he's gonna have to spend some time with the G. So we'll get to see Orlando, but no big takeaways. A couple L's, hard fought games. Quincy Guerrier back in the starting lineup, but uh, other than that, nothing crazy for me.
Yeah, fair enough. I think I'm in agreement with you watching it without Battle and Mobile there. I think they organize and settle a lot of their lineups and their actions. So not having Battle to kind of finish and punctuate some of those possessions, not having Mobo to organize and do some of that connective passing that I like to talk about that he does, I think really did impact them. I will shout out Jarrett Roden. I know Blake Murphy has talked a lot about him being a candidate for a 10-day in the back half of the season, whether it's with the Raptors or with another team. These two games, he was balling 19 and a half points, 7 rebounds, 2.5 assists, 2 steals, a block, and 54% from three through these two games. So very good stuff from Jared Roden. I am interested with the whole center rotation you mentioned, Coty, with Orlando Robinson probably having to spend more time with the G League. The depth for the center's position at the Raptors level gets very dicey with just Jakob Poeltl, who is hurt right now. Obviously, Orlando Robinson's already used one of those NBA games just backing up Jakob Poeltl with the against the Thunder. So, like, does Frank Kaminsky potentially get a look? I think he's interesting because he doesn't have the defensive chops, obviously, but he's
Yeah.
very similar to a Kelly Olynyk, and that's obviously somebody the Raptors had a look on.
Or does
Oh,
Prince or Shamshay get some
he's a
NBA
prince now.
run? I don't know. I see people calling him Prince Shamshay, so I'm
I
gonna
like the
run with it.
sleeping giant. That's the word you use in your video, sleeping giant.
That is a sleeping giant. Go watch that, by the way, if you haven't.
Yeah,
It's a little bit outdated now. It was the first like 14 games of the season, but
gets the point across.
an AJ Lawson one coming soon, probably in like a week.
Yeah, you and me
So
have just been going sicko hunting at the 905. I got a thing on
what
Jonathan
do we
Mobo
need to?
cooking. You
Yeah,
got AJ Lawson.
do we need to rant about? I don't know. We'll save that for another day.
Oh
About
no, G
how
League.
infuriating it is to do put these stuff together, but you can't get that anywhere else, folks. Please like, subscribe, comment, all that. We got us grinding the G League stuff. Nobody else is like literally nobody else is
Yeah,
doing it.
we're
So
hand tracking stuff. Coty, when you said it at first, I was like, kudos to you. Salute hand tracking stuff. Good. It's awesome. I give it a shot and I want to break my computer. Oh
yeah.
my God, hand tracking stats. I'm not going to get into a rant today. That's for another day. But like Coty said, we are doing some very meaningful work here just so we can get informative content to you guys, especially about the Raptors 905. I don't think any other G League team has this much dedication to it. So please, please, please show it some love when it does come out there. Last thing before we move on super quick, Jamison Battle gets converted from a two-way deal to a 3-year standard NBA contract. So shout out to him. Quick numbers here for some people who haven't seen. In the G League, he was shooting over 50% from three, which was second in the G League. In the NBA, he leads all rookies in three-point percentage. He doesn't take many yet. Obviously, he's only played 30-some games in the NBA. His minutes have been quite low, but he's shown he has an NBA-level skill. Coty, I think you and me have both seen he's taken major strides in some other areas as a defender, cutter. He's also gotten comfortable putting it on the deck. But very, very quickly, Jamison Battle fulfills the undrafted success story. Exhibit 10 to a two-way to a standard contract, the Chris Boucher model, some would say. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, just got to keep grinding, keep doing. He fully deserved. He proved he could shoot it with the best of them. Literally, like he's like one of the best shooters I've seen. Like
Yeah,
come through the 905 and the Raptors. Honestly, like he's fantastic. It just goes in all the time. His 3-point percentage in the G League is better than his field goal percentage. I don't even know how that's possible, and it's almost at 60%. And it's not
how
even
is
on
that
like
possible?
I actually don't know, but it is. Uh, but yeah, fully deserved 3-year deal. Good note by Blake. They could have gone more. They could have gone one more year, I believe, but they didn't
Yeah,
to keep the RFA status, which is a big bonus.
it's a good point.
Um, and yeah, as long as he keeps doing his thing, and we talked to him, or I talked to him. I don't know. I'm not sure if you were at that one, but he said his defense is the most confident he's felt in recent weeks, and this was right before he got called back up.
Yeah,
So
we were there together.
yeah, I wasn't sure if you were there or not, but that's something he said. He's feeling good, and Coach Drew has felt good about it. So let's see what he can got. He's gonna get some run with the big club. All these guys are now, so it's gonna be fun to watch. It's gonna be
Yeah.
fun to watch.
Look, they got what they needed out of these 905 reps. Like you said, when you were there and he talked about his confidence, I asked him, like, where's his confidence coming from? He said, well, it's just the reps and being with this team and building that ability in terms of knowing where I fit in, knowing that I can use my frame, my 6'7", 6'8" body, 220 pounds. He's a stocky guy, so he can use that ability a bit more comfortably. Hopefully, that's something you see with a Brandon Ingram as well in this team, and maybe they empower him in that way as a defender. You never know if it can work for Jonathan Mobo and for Jameson Battle. If it can work for those guys, maybe it can work for Brandon as well. But look, the 905 is doing what it's supposed to do, and which it hasn't done for a long time for these Raptors rookies and young guys. It's happening now. These reps have been important. These reps have paid off for them, and we're definitely going to see in the back half of the season what this team is able to do with the young guys. And speaking of looking at next week for the Raptors, they only have 2 games on the docket. Obviously, it's the week before All-Star break, so it's a bit of a lighter schedule. The Raptors visit the Philadelphia 76ers and Joel Embiid. And then they take on the Cleveland Cavaliers, the East leading Cavaliers, who just may have gotten better, like we mentioned before, by getting DeAndre Hunter. That is going to be a scary, scary team. That is on the second night of a back-to-back as well. After taking on Philadelphia Tuesday, they take on Cleveland Wednesday. Tough, tough, tough stuff. Coty, what do you want to see from the Raptors this week?
Oh boy. Try not to get killed. That's probably number
It's a good
one,
goal.
especially if I'm not sure if Pirtle's going to be available for Philly. If he's not and Embiid's in, which I guess is also a question mark.
Yeah, that's a good point.
It's going to be a murder, unfortunately. Like I don't think they've won a game this season with Jakob Pirtle out of the lineup. It's been notorious. The record's terrible when he's out of the lineup. I think they've only won like 3 or 4 games. It's like 4 in like
It's super low.
35. It's something like that. So that's going to be a murder. And then if he's not there for Cleveland, that's an even bigger murder because they're even bigger and they're even badder and they're even scarier. DeAndre Hunter fits them perfectly. Um, I just want to see the young guys continue to compete. These are good teams. Like I mentioned, these next like 8 games, good teams, good teams.
Yeah.
I want to see what the young guys can do. They're guaranteed rotation minutes every night now. If these guys aren't playing close to 20 minutes every night or starting with injuries, I'm not sure what's going on. So sad for us as we cover 905, might not be able to talk to them unless a playoff run happens, which let's hope they're in position for it. But they're gonna get a bunch of run. It's just all young guys now, right? They've flipped the veterans. They want to be bad. So let's I guess let's see how the process is.
Yeah, I'm completely in lockstep with you, Cody. My one note of what I want to see this week is more looks from the rookies. How do Battle, Moba, and Walter look? Keep going through this stretch. Same with Jamal Shedd, obviously, like I've already talked about, being in that number 2 point guard spot. It's interesting because Jacoby Walter getting a lot more on-ball reps. We can see his juice as a shot creator, what he can do as that middleman guy. Jamison Battle, he's basically their only high frequency, high efficiency of 3 point shooter. Like Grady Dick is high volume, his efficiency goes up and down with stretches. Emmanuel quickly, he has decent efficiency. He probably needs to be taking more threes than he does. Emmanuel quickly, quite honestly, I think a lot of people have talked about that. Like I said, Samson Folk has a very good article about that today. Go check it out on RaptorsRepublic.com. But yeah, Jameson Battle is basically their next best 3 point shooter right now. And Jonathan Mobile, he's being asked to do quite a lot defensively. He's been switching everything. Has been fun, and I think Darko Rajakovic even spoke about it today to media, where he was like, "Look, we want Jonathan Mobile to be a wing, a big wing, and not a small ball center. The problem is we don't have our center right now in Jakob Poeltl, so we have no choice. So instead, they have Jonathan Mobile guarding Cat, guarding Chet. They're probably going to have him dealing with Alperen Şengün against the Rockets. It is a tough, tough task for a rookie, let alone a rookie who gives up size to some of these matchups. He's done admirably in spots. He had a couple, like I put a video out on Twitter where like he did pretty well against Cat in terms of his one-on-one matchup. Wasn't so hot against Chet Holmgren, who's obviously a bit more mobile than Cat is, I would say. But all these reps are important. So like you said, more looks for the rookies. They're going to have the minutes. How do they develop through that kind of stuff? And where are their roles fitting in? Because I think the overarching point behind a lot of this stuff when we talk about like money concerns and everything, the Raptors front office basically said, well, we have this very top core group on these bigger deals. We have to get as much juice as we can out of these rookie contracts, out of these second round rookie contract picks, out of the value. You have Jamal Shedd and I believe Jameson Battle basically on rookie minimum deals. So when you have those guys making that little money, if they can be top contributors off the bench for you, you're going to be able to do the things you want by paying the top guys still. So I think that's going to be super important from them. But Cody, that's where I stand. Any last thoughts from you before we wrap this up?
I think we've gone long enough. It's been a wild week. We're kind of the last ones on RR to talk about it, so hopefully people wanted to hear our opinion and are still interested to hear more about this BI discussion. Um, Hope everybody enjoyed. It was nice to be back,
Hell yeah.
talking hoops with Z. You can't get much better than that. Shout out to Toronto Tempo. I see you wearing the merch. I
Oh
don't the
yeah,
guys.
baby.
I don't think he's taken that off since he got it. So
I actually
uh,
don't think I did once to wash it, so at least I'm being
right.
hygienic. But
Yes.
after washing it, I have just slapped it back on.
Yeah, and he got it like what 2, 3 weeks ago now. So it's
I
one
think so.
wash.
Yeah. Okay, now you just make me sound gross, but fair enough.
Yeah, I don't know why. He's not gross. Let's clarify.
Yeah, I hope. I mean, I don't think I am, but I guess that's a matter of opinion. But hey, maybe we'll be talking about the Toronto Tempo one day. Hopefully, in the future, we will be covering them as well. I know I'm excited for that. I'm sure you are as well, Cody. But that pretty much does it for us this week. We want to thank everyone for tuning in to another edition of Run It Back, where we recap everything from the Raptors. We'll obviously be back next week to recap even more action. Hopefully, we can get some more on this new team, the young guys. Don't expect a Brandon Ingram return, but hey, you never know. But until then, make sure you subscribe to the Raptors Republic YouTube channel to get your daily fix of coverage. I know we've been plugging a lot of people's work and what they're doing. Raptors Republic stays busy. We stay on top of this stuff. It's your go-to spot. And if you want to get more news, analysis, and opinions, head over to raptorsrepublic.com for the top stuff on that. But besides that, have a great week, folks. For myself, Zulfi Sheikh, for Cody Wiles, we'll see you next time when we run it back. Peace.